Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2025-2026 as presented on Tuesday evening by the Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, and of course the parliamentary representative for the constituency of Castries East. As I rise, Mr. Speaker, I do so at the behest of the people of Dennery North, who, after 3 general elections, Mr. Speaker, continue to repose their confidence in me to be their voice of reason and their voice of advocacy. And Mr. Speaker, believe it or not, the conversation has started again. And all around the street corners in Dennery North, in the shops and the byways, people are talking about 4 in a row, whatever it means to them. I think what they're trying to say, Mr. Speaker, that on all the occasions they have gone to the various polling stations to vote for me to be their parliamentary representative, in the majority, they are satisfied with the manner in which I have conducted their affairs. Mr. Speaker, but before I get to the substantive part of my presentation, I'd like to recognize for their support and their love the people of Oleon and Despin, Lapel, Tilarissus, and Gadet, Denny Riviere Belmont, Grand Ravine Richform, and Grand Riviere, Mr. Speaker. And the communities I've just mentioned, collectively, they constitute the Dennery North constituency. Mr. Speaker, I also want to shout out, so to speak, who I'm sure they're listening to this particular budget presentation, Sir Julian Hunt, Sir Calix George, my friend whom I want to congratulate, Cyprian Sly Duplessis, for having been conferred with the Lepito Medal Gold for his contribution to sports development in our constituency, and all the well-wishers in Dennery North, Mr. Speaker, whom in my darkest of days in this parliamentary discourse have stood by me as sources of strength, inspiration, and support. Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday evening, we witnessed in the Prime Minister a man on Tuesday evening, Mr. Speaker, we witnessed a man on top of his craft. And I decided to Google what exactly is meant by a man on top of his craft. And it referred to the individual as someone who has reached a high level of skill and expertise in a chosen field. And that is what the current Prime Minister, unlike his immediate predecessor, Mr. Speaker, represents. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister continues to confound his critics and silence his detractors. The figures presented here on Tuesday night, Mr. Speaker, those figures are a portrait of sound, decisive public sector financial management. The figures are more than allocations of monies to departments, projects, and programs. Mr. Speaker, the figures tell a story. They tell a story of prudent fiscal management. And Mr. Speaker, the figures speak to a Prime Minister and Minister for Finance who is the best person for the job in country today as we speak. The figures speak to a team of men and women. It speaks to a cabinet, Mr. Speaker, supporting a leader in ensuring that we deliver to the people of this country. And Mr. Speaker, the figures also speak to a team of professionals or technocrats, if you like, in the Ministry of Finance and the various agencies who have been working with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet to ensure that we are where we are at today. And Mr. Speaker, we should not forget the contribution of the member for ancillary canneries in the Ministry of Finance. And Mr. Speaker, I know it is the Prime Minister who comes forward and presents the figures, but the work of the member for ancillary canneries, Minister in the Ministry of Finance, should not be underestimated. Mr. Speaker, in the time allotted to me, I will briefly mention the allocations to the various agencies in my ministerial remit. But the bulk of the time will be spent on matters pertaining to Dennery North, especially in the wake of a $2 billion budget. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education, or should I say the Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training, has received 14% of the national budget. The Department of Education, Innovation, and Vocational Training received a recurrent allocation of $245,353,800 and a capital allocation of $16,640,800. And so, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education, Innovation, and Vocational Training sets off with $261,994,600. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Sustainable Development within that particular ministry has been allocated a recurrent budget of $25,835,600, Mr. Speaker, and a capital amount of $1,620,700, giving the agency or the department $27,456,300. And as I indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, with a combined allocation or portfolio allocation of $288,450,900, the Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training makes off, Mr. Speaker, with 14% of the national budget. Mr. Speaker, there are several programs in the Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training that have been accounted for with figures that will ensure that we are more impactful in all our areas of programming. But, Mr. Speaker, I will leave pronouncements on those programs to the debate at the appropriation bill level when that particular sitting is held. Mr. Speaker, I want to move straight into matters pertaining to Dennery North, my constituency. And I want to refer you to Head 48, Department of Housing and Local Government. Mr. Speaker, National Sites and Services Program, $3,310,000. The National Sites and Services Program seeks to provide affordable housing solutions for citizens through the creation of service lots in areas of this country where housing is needed. Mr. Speaker, it addresses a housing insecurity issue that we have in the country today, a deficit, if you like, in our housing stock. And Mr. Speaker, that particular problem has been manifesting itself in Dennery North for some time now. Mr. Speaker, too many of the young professionals, university graduates from Dennery North, are moving to places like Kareli and Union Terrace and other developments in this country because they cannot find adequate land and housing accommodation in Dennery North. But here's what, Mr. Speaker. That particular situation has triggered the Mabuya Valley Housing and Settlement Enhancement Master Plan, where, Mr. Speaker, we will be creating housing schemes in the constituency to solve that particular problem. Mr. Speaker, there's a plot of land or an area in Olio known as Madwa. The land at Madwa is owned by private individuals, and the government also owns a big chunk of the land in that area. Mr. Speaker, the area comprised a total of 56.03 acres, and preliminary surveys have indicated that at Madwa, we can get approximately 200 lots, whereby the people of Olio, and by extension, the people of the Mabuya Valley, can actually get housing accommodation in that particular area. Mr. Speaker, lot sizes range from medium to low density. That is, from 5,878 square feet to 12,119 square feet. Mr. Speaker, the development will cater to low income, middle income, as well as upper income individuals. Mr. Speaker, we have to find a way to keep our young people in the valley. And the Minister for Housing and I have had preliminary discussions on this, Mr. Speaker. But I have gone further, even beyond the Ministry of Housing, to ensure that preliminary surveys have been done, so that by the time the Cabinet endorses the master plan, which we're hoping to start soon, Mr. Speaker, the people of Olio and the valley will be better off for it. Mr. Speaker, we also have identified or earmarked lands in Belmont, Kadikope area. The lands earmarked belong, Mr. Speaker, to Invest St. Lucia or the government of St. Lucia, and some plots are privately owned. The government, Mr. Speaker, will do the necessary acquisition of the land to ensure that we provide approximately 130 lots at affordable rates to the people of the Mabuya Valley, complementing the 200 lots that I mentioned for Madwa in Olio. In Madwa, Mr. Speaker, we intend to have proper roads, electricity, telephone services, and all water and all other amenities that come with a modern development. Je veux dire que Denry North, nous avons une situation où un pile jeune monde qui a quitté Valia, ils allé à l'université, ils allé à l'école, et qui passent à joindre un côté que ils savent faire en caille, dans une commune, que ils sont confortables et puis bagaille comme ça. Et c'est pour raison ça, Mr. Speaker. Nous avons gardé en place en Olion, que ils ont quitté Madwa, et nous avons aussi gardé Belmont Cali area, que nous avons fait à peu près ensemble, plus qui ont presque 4000, ça nous a créé lots, 400 lots, Mr. Speaker, available pour jeunes gens dans Valley, ça fait caillou. Et nous avons cru que nous faisons ça, nous n'avons pas payer tellement d'argent pour hen qualité de ça. Mr. Speaker, still on the head 48, Ministry of Housing, the National Housing Assistance Program. Mr. Speaker, I noticed that in this year's budget, the National Housing Assistance Program, or the NAP as they call it, has been allotted $1.7 million. Mr. Speaker, I want to echo the sentiments expressed earlier by the member for Beaufort North. Mr. Speaker, there is no excuse that should be made for the interventions that we have been making in the lives of people who are finding it difficult to rehabilitate their homes. Mr. Speaker, in Denry North, we embark on a program where we rehabilitate homes for people with the tagline, "We do not build mansions, we improve conditions of living." And only yesterday I had to upload on Facebook to remind our detractors that there are people in this country, there are people in my constituency who are living in conditions that are just not acceptable for human habitation in 2025. But I will hasten to add that this did not start on the 26th of July, 2021. We inherited those problems. They've been in existence, Mr. Speaker, for as long as we know ourselves. But we should not sit idly by and do nothing. So when we come and we construct a plywood house for somebody who is living in conditions worse than what some dogs enjoy in this country, Mr. Speaker, we ought to do that for an element of pride and dignity as we assist our people. And so, Mr. Speaker, through this program, the National Housing Assistance Program, we've been able, Mr. Speaker, to make interventions in the lives of many people. We have had to demolish and reconstruct homes in Olean, in Denier Riviere, and other parts of the constituency. We've had to do it in Grand Ravine, Mr. Speaker. In other instances, we've had to donate building materials to people who have taken it on themselves to go ahead and rehabilitate their homes. Mr. Speaker, je veux dire la pièce honte. Là, un monde ni un petit caille plywood qui pourri, qui a coulé, qui pas ni clanson, il pas même ni sanglé nous a créé Florine, Mr. Speaker. Et nous venons comme un gouvernement et bien comme un membre parlement et nous dit about housing assistance program that nous a bail moun ça anti-soulagement. Moi pas croire ici ba qui juste pour moun l'autre side là pour venir et puis faire ridicule et puis ça. Mr. Speaker, nous ca envoyer des moun qu'on nous plaît. Et so aller en constituency moi. And if you go into Despin, you go to Tillarisus, you go to Lapel, you go to Belmont, Mr. Speaker, you will see that we have made interventions in the lives of the people of my constituency. Mr. Speaker, Head 53, the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the Larissus Health Center is open for business. And I had the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of going to the Larissus Health Center on Tuesday of last week, and I was attended to by a doctor, Mr. Speaker, whom I trusted. I still trust, Mr. Speaker, and I implore all of my constituents to trust the doctors at the Larissus Health Center, as they should all other doctors at all health facilities in this country. And Mr. Speaker, before I even thank the Prime Minister and the Minister responsible for health for their intervention on the Larry Resource Health Center. Let me say and place on the record my admiration, Mr. Speaker, for the healthcare professionals in this country. The doctors, the nurses, Mr. Speaker, the stewards, the security guards, and all the persons who come together to make our healthcare system what it is today. Mr. Speaker, like the minister, I'll be the first to admit that there are areas that need improvement. But that is not unique to St. Lucia. Go to the US, listen to the debates in the Parliament of the UK, and you will hear the amount of pressure that is being placed on the government of the day as it relates to the NHS. And that is a global phenomenon. But we should not take solace and comfort in the fact that healthcare systems around the world are broken, and because of that, we should say it is okay. You heard from the minister himself how much resources we've been able to pump as an administration into the healthcare system since we took over the reins of government. So it is a work in progress. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, that one day, we will get to a point where our healthcare system will not be the best in the OECS, but one of the best in the hemisphere. And you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because you have a government that is compassionate. You have a government who has an appreciation for healthcare. And Mr. Speaker, you have dedicated healthcare professionals who have proven time and again that their loyalty is to the profession. They are committed to the people whom they serve. And all they need from those of us, Mr. Speaker, who are in the politics is a word of encouragement to say that we appreciate. So when you hear, Mr. Speaker, people on the other side trying to disparage the work of doctors and nurses in this country, Mr. Speaker, that ought to receive the wrath of not just members of the government, but there ought to be a national, Mr. Speaker, condemnation of such utterances. It is distasteful, it is disrespectful, and it is, Mr. Speaker, reflective of individuals who are about themselves, who are power hungry, and will do whatever is necessary to ensure that they find themselves in government again. And if it means that they have to injure the professionals to do it, Mr. Speaker, they will do it. If it means that they have to sully and tarnish the reputation of this country to do it, Mr. Speaker, they will do it. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not new to them. They didn't learn their lesson, and that is why they are where they are at today and will be there for a very long time. And so, Mr. Speaker, I said the Larry Resource Health Center is once again open for business. Yes. The health center was destroyed by fire in 2015, Mr. Speaker. In 2015. And yes, I will make the admission that when fire destroyed the Larry Resource Health Center, I was the incumbent parliamentary rep for Denry North. And the St. Lucia Labour Party was in government. And Dr. Kenny Anthony was the Prime Minister of the day, in much the same way that the Honorable Alvina Reynolds, today's President of the Senate, she was the custodian of the Health Ministry at the time. And Mr. Speaker, if the health center was destroyed by fire in March, the budget process starts in March. We do appropriation bill in April. Mr. Speaker, we were able in quick time to ensure that in the estimates of 2015, there was an allocation for the reinstatement of the Larry Resource Health Center. The government changed. We went to the polls and the people spoke and we accepted the results of the elections. But that did not warrant a wicked, vindictive leader of the opposition. No compassion. You know what they did, Mr. Speaker? They took the money out of the budget. They did not take it out in the first year and say, look, we have our constituencies to look after. They'll reinstate it the following year. For 5 years, he took it out of the budget. He dragged us into a 6th year. No reinstatement of the monies he found in the budget for the health center. And today, Mr. Speaker, the member for Choiseul can stand in this parliament. And Mr. Speaker, I can't help but express my disappointment with the member for Choiseul for some of the utterances he makes in this house. And sometimes I honestly believe, Mr. Speaker, that he is not speaking on his own volition. But he has been programmed. He has been instructed to go to the parliament and say certain things, or else he will face the wrath of the people on his side. Because I don't understand how a man who sat in a cabinet, who knew that this was happening, he said nothing about it. He did not denounce it in a quiet corner in the lounge when we spoke downstairs. He did not speak against it on television. He never stood in the house and said it was wrong. But today he can summon the courage, Mr. Speaker, to come and talk about victimization and how a community center in his constituency is not being opened. Yes. Lendus took over the Laristus Health Center, and you were in cabinet, you did not speak against it. And Mr. Speaker, if a facility has to be opened in his constituency, we will open the facility. And as I said to the member for Ancillary downstairs, who provides oversight for the Department of Economic Development, I am sure there is a plausible explanation as to why the facility has not been opened. We are not about victimization. Because we understand, Mr. Speaker, that if we deny him resources, and if we deny the member for Miku South resources, we're not hurting them. We are punishing the people of Monsieur and Piaille and Lacouville. They are the ones who will fill it, not the two members. They're good for themselves. And that is why every time we allocate CDP resources, Mr. Speaker, irrespective of the quantum available to the Prime Minister, he ensures that the member for Choiseul gets, and he ensures that the member for Mikud South gets. So, when you hear them, and the Flowers have something about them, Mr. Speaker, and I'm still on Head 53, the Laristus Health Center. But I have to meander, Mr. Speaker. I'm taking my time on the Laristus Health Center. I'm proud of the work that we've done in relation to the Laristus Health Center. I know I am taking my time, because like the member for Beaufort North, I have confidence in the healthcare professionals of this country. So the money was in the estimates for the Laristus Health Center. They took the money out. Mr. Speaker, I would have said when I occupied the chair that is vacant between the member for Choiseul and the member for Dennery South in opposition. And when Andy Daniel sat in this chair, I remember saying to him and the Parliament at the time, that the Alan Chasney administration did not have to face a bank to take any loan to reinstate the health center, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that was grant funding. And we all in here know that when you get grant monies, especially if the line item says ROCT, Republic of China, Taiwan, Mr. Speaker, you are 400% guaranteed that the money will come. They took it out. And why did they take it out? Because they believe that if they had taken the money out and the health center was not reinstated and it was infested with rats and cockroaches overgrown by vines and whatnot, the people of Denver would have pointed a finger at me and say, Shawn back at vine, look, I vote against Lee. But the people are more discerning today than ever before. It did not work, Mr. Speaker. It did not work, Mr. Speaker. And I remember on the campaign trail, the Prime Minister of the day in opposition, he gave me a commitment that once we win the elections, in the first term, Mr. Speaker, the Laristus Health Center will be reinstated. He has kept his word, not just to me, but to the people of Dennery North. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Vieux-Fort North for his intervention, ensuring that under his ministerial watch, the Laristus Health Center has been reinstated. I want to thank Prime Minister Pierre for the reinstatement of the Laristus Health Center. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the team from the Ministry of Health, the PS, the CMO, the FA, the project coordinator, and all the people at the Ministry of Health who ensured that this project happened, and today we can enjoy our facility. And I remember it was Dr. Poyot, the member for Babono, who said that this is not a health center. It resembles a mini hospital. Mr. Speaker, we did not just paint the burnt walls. We didn't just decide to just do the roof over. Mr. Speaker, to complement the pristine physical environment that the nurses and the patients are enjoying, Mr. Speaker, we ensured that there were new services available to the people of Dennery North at the Laristus Health Center. Growing up as a child in the Mabuya Valley, if you had any need for any dental intervention, you had to go to Dennery Village, the hospital, once a week. Once a week, the dentist would come and attend to you. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? The people of the Mabuya Valley no longer must travel to Dennery South or Dennery Village for dental care. This service is available at the Laristus Health Center. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the District Medical Officer, Dr. Ajuda, Dr. Glasgow, Dr. Behrens, and all the other doctors, Dr. Sexius, who have worked with us in the Dennery Basin. Because I saw firsthand that when Larry Sus was out of commission, the volume, the sheer numbers that descended on the Richmond facility for healthcare. And we're talking about hundreds of people, Mr. Speaker, a week. And that was not even in keeping with globally accepted standards in terms of ratio of patients to doctors. Les Larry Sus te fermé, sans moun, plusieurs moun te ka ale, oui font pour les docteurs. Et ces docteurs, c'est non même te ka dou. Ça c'est trop moun pour yo en yon jour et ben yon semaine. But today, Mr. Speaker, the Larry Sus Health Center has been reinstated. And as we speak, plans are afoot to begin work to rehabilitate the Richmond Health Center. Thank you, Minister for Health. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you to the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, I am still on Head 53, the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, like my colleague from Dennery South, I want to welcome 24-hour service at the Dennery Hospital. This is something I've been clamoring for ever since I entered this parliament in the year 2011. Mr. Speaker, I would have given this story here before, where people have come to my home at 2 and 3 in the morning when they cannot reach the ambulance, and they tap on my window because they have an emergency and they need a ride to the hospital. And Mr. Speaker, I have to jump out of bed. It's a call to duty that I must respond to. And when they board my vehicle and we're moving, and I get to the intersection of the Larry Sus and Richmond Highway, Mr. Speaker, I have to ponder, I have to think, do I turn left and go to St. Jude, or do I turn right to go to VH as it was at the time, or the OKEU? And Mr. Speaker, simply because at midnight, nobody would be available at the Dennery Hospital to attend to the people of the Dennery Basin. So when I hear a pronouncement coming from the Ministry of Health, and the minister has assured me that there will be a 24-hour service, Mr. Speaker, at the Dennery Hospital, this is something I must applaud. And I will tell you why, Mr. Speaker. This particular intervention is of benefit not only to the people of Dennery South and Dennery North. The catchment for the Dennery Hospital is a lot more than the 2 Dennery constituencies. Pralin, Monrepo, I know of people who would live Wavin Poisson and they prefer, Mr. Speaker, going to the Dennery Hospital for healthcare instead of having to go to the OKEU or another facility. So I welcome that particular intervention. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to Head 43. Head 43, Ministry of Infrastructure, or the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Transport. Mr. Speaker, roads. Roads, roads, roads. Everybody has been talking about roads. We all need roads. Just imagine being in opposition for 5 years, dragged into a 6th year, and you cannot even procure a bag of cement. And I say that and we laugh. But that whole sack cement phenomenon is not a joke, Mr. Speaker. People came to me and they complained. They applied the pressure on me. They won their roads. They voted for me. I'm the elected rep. I have to go to Parliament and ask for roads. And I come to the Parliament foolishly with the expectation that there's a budget for roads and I'm duly elected and my people pay taxes and they will be benefiting from roads too. And I was denied for 1 year, denied for a 2nd year, a 3rd year, a 4th year, a 5th year, dragged into a 6th year, and I could not preside over one piece of road in my constituency. So one day, Mr. Speaker, I summoned the courage to travel to the Ministry of Infrastructure to see the senior minister. And I did put up on Facebook, and you can check my Facebook history and you'll see that post. And I went to plead to him and said to him at the time that even if nothing is done, resurface the Olio Road. And being the statesman that he has been from the day he entered the political arena, the senior minister gave me the assurance that the road would have been done. And true to form, Mr. Speaker, the Olio Road was resurfaced from Larry Sus all the way to Montego Bay. And so I felt vindicated. I took pictures as I always do, and I uploaded that on Facebook. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? I was lynched. I was called all kinds of names. I was told that I was taking credit for the work of their government. But anybody who knows me will tell you that whether I am in government or I'm in opposition, I remain true to my job and my responsibilities as the parliamentary rep. And that is how we got the Olio Road paved. And I went back to Senior Minister, Mr. Speaker, for more. And this time he said he could not give me as much as I wanted. But in the meantime, he noticed that the railings of the bridges in Denrinoff, they need a coat of paint. Let us try and help somebody in the community. And if all the enthusiasm of a parliamentary rep was being starved of resources, I decided to supply names to the senior minister. And then he came back in this inimitable style of his. He said to me, man, you wouldn't believe what happened to me because I allowed you to submit 2 names to paint a bridge. He will tell that story himself. I'm hoping that that is somewhere in the library. Just for painting a railing on a bridge. That is what I was subjected to. So when you had a member for Chozel's Salty Bus, Mr. Speaker, programmed as he has been, coming here and uttering things that are at total variance with what we've known of him in times past. Mr. Speaker, I almost feel sorry for him. That somebody has to subject himself to that. Where you come and you utter words that clearly are not yours. That is not what we know you to be. You're more dignified than that. Let them come and say it. And if those who want to say it in here will never see this chamber again, tell them find a suitable platform to say it. But don't come here and make such utterances. Don't come and give the impression that we are victimizing. We are not the administration that victimizes people. And recently they unveiled their slate of candidates, if I should just digress a bit, Mr. Speaker. And a gentleman who has been tipped to contest in Denrinoff, one of the first things that came out of his mouth is that we need to stop victimization in Denrinoff. But what he did not know is that from the 26th of July 2021, victimization stopped in Denrinoff. I stopped it. And you want to know what I stopped? You want to know what I stopped or what I suffered? Let me tell you what I suffered first as it relates to victimization. I will say it ad nauseum in this place. Joseph Kelly, we call him Vaz, a grave digger. He's the one who lowers the bodies into the grave, Mr. Speaker, on days when we have burial. He has a child that is disabled, never walked in her life. Differently abled, sorry, Mr. Speaker. She has never walked in her life. Mr. Speaker, you should have seen the conditions under which he lived prior to the National Housing Program having been used to improve his conditions. You should have seen what he had to endure. And for supporting Shawn Edward and the Central Labour Party, they fired the man. They fired the man. Mr. Speaker, when I came in 2011 for the first time, the school transportation program in Denrinoff, I found several UWP bus drivers on the program, with the exception of 2 for their own stupidity. One, TX12, I can say it in this house, was transporting students, and I have photos to prove it, in an SUV all the way to Beaufort Comprehensive School. In an SUV. We had to stop him. And one other person who lost. All UWP drivers were retained. Because, Mr. Speaker, when I came in, I knew for a fact that they had loans paying to the bank. I knew when I came in that they had children to feed. I knew when they came in they had bills to pay. And so we were able to strike a nice balance. Foolish me. Then came the election. Administration changed. And every single bus driver, tall or short, irrespective of where in St. Lucia your route was, and I challenged them to refute what I'm going to say, every bus driver associated with the Labour Party was fired. Every single one of them. That is what they did. Werner, Cathy, Mava, caregivers. What was this? They were regular workers. Their punctuality record was impeccable. But they were supporters of Shawn Edward and the Labour Party, and so they had to be fired. And I won my seat, Mr. Speaker. I won my seat. There was a recount. The people of Denrinoff spoke, and I was denied resources. I sat over there. I watched PowerPoint presentations in the corner there. I watched men posture in their seats there. I saw them on their feet. They were hurling insults. They ridiculed us. They tried to belittle us, Mr. Speaker. and we stomach all. And as the statesmen we were at the time, we stayed, and when legislation was being passed at 2 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Speaker, we honored our responsibilities to the Parliament. We stayed. And with sleepy eyes, we were crossing the Badlil in the wee hours, trying to facilitate the work of the government in the Parliament. They had no sympathy. They had no respect. They had no time for us. And then you're telling me today, the member from Choiseul can come and stand in this Parliament and make it seem as if somebody owed him lights, when lights were being put in all corners of this country. Where were you, Mr. MP? You must have been asleep for you, Mr. Speaker. But you owe a debt of gratitude to this government and the member for Gruzili for ensuring that you have lights. And I know the minister well enough that anywhere in this country that deserves light, you will get lights. Yes. Mr. Speaker, roads. So I told you about the Olio Road having been surfaced by the senior minister based on the intervention that I made on that day. Mr. Speaker, you would have seen on social media that roads have been constructed in Denry North. And there is a misconception, and sadly, even in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, that Denry North gets an allocation that was superior to that of other constituencies when it comes to road. And I implore the senior minister and the prime minister and the minister in the Ministry of Finance to make the figures available. Under the rim, we have only received $2.9 million. But Mr. Speaker, the thing about me is that when you put resources in my hands, I know how to stretch it. I know how to magnify it. I know how to make it look big. I know how to satisfy my people with little, not in the way that the member for Castries Central does. But I know how to satisfy with little, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know how to stretch my resources. And Mr. Speaker, when I came in, just imagine nothing had been done in 6 years. So naturally, the roads would have been in a deplorable state. Let me to a government, après, you pas besoin your opposition. C'est chemin valiateur dans l'État. A mess. And so, we are beginning to fix the roads. And the United Workers' Party supporters in constituency cannot live with the fact that there is a comprehensive road rehabilitation program happening in Denry North. And then you hear them say, oh, so the cardinal parlement chemin. Others say, oh, chemin on the fait. But it's all by. So where's the only problem? Et puis, dès que chemin a fait, brace cause, c'est there again chemin. And you would have seen the meme on social media. When they hear a concrete truck in Denry North, they're on their toes, Mr. Speaker, trying to see in which direction it is coming from. But we will do our roads. Mr. Speaker, I can highlight in any one of the constituencies in this chamber where one road would cost more or twice the amount that has been spent on roads in Denry North during this term of government. I can. Whether it is Zabo to Bellevue, or it is the Majomel, the Majomel Road, the Venus Road, or the Marigo Road. All those roads I've mentioned, Mr. Speaker, cost more than what has been spent in Denry North on roads. But, Mr. Speaker, with only 2.9 under the rim, and I cannot speak of the accomplishments we've been able to register with the 2.9 without thanking the chief engineer, without thanking the prime minister, without thanking the minister himself for the conversations. And sometimes I know all of us, we go to the prime minister with our list, and PM never says no. He says, I'll see what I can do for you. But, Mr. Speaker, I've been working with a team in Zone 3. An engineer by the name of Janelle Fevrier, ably assisted by Whitson Charles, Kayla, Rena, Ali, and the other team in Zone 3. And they have done a fantastic job working with me to ensure that we maximize the benefits of the 2.5. So I've been able to do the Lower Despin Olio Combined School Road, Upper Montego Bay Olio, Alemon Road, which links Montparnasse to Alemon in Grand Riviere. We've been able to do an Alemon side road, Mr. Speaker, going down by Diana We've been able to do Compare Belmont, that link road from Grand Ravine. The Richmond School Road, the Belmont overlay from Geneva in Daniel Riviere all the way up to Belmont in the area that we call JJ's Junction. Et puis $2.9 millions nous avons fait toutes ces chemins ça. Et moi, quand je demande ministre qui a responsabilité pour chemin, et bien n'importe l'autre ministre qui a information ça pour dire n'importe côté de cette liste, that écoutez nous seulement $2.9 millions pour faire ces chemins là. Through CDP and other means, we've been able to do the Cemetery Road, the Apartheid Road in Lapel, the road near Louvina in Belmont. And Mr. Speaker, how can I forget the Austin Hill Road? The Austin Hill Road. And let me tell you about the Austin Hill Road and the member for Micoud South. Kaitan, the member for Micoud South, upon assuming office, found that we had done the middle section of the Austin Hill Road. And again, the expectation was that we've started, I'm elected, so I will get some assistance from the government. For 6 years, nothing. But guess what? Today, the Austin Hill Road has been reinstated for the people of Austin Hill. We've done Walcott to Dorcas. We've done Manton to Pin in Oleon. We've done Clevana to Lulu in Belmont. And Mr. Speaker, as we speak, we have the Mambur stretch, the Larisus stretch, or the Mabuya Valley Promenade, whatever you want to call it. And Mr. Speaker, let me tell you about that piece of road. You can call it MVP if you want, because it is an MVP project, the Mabuya Valley Promenade. Increased carriageway, signage and road markings, improved drainage, landscaping and planting of trees, Mr. Speaker. And this particular stretch of road can be blocked at both entrances for the hosting of mass crowd events when it is completed. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank again the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Infrastructure for their intervention. But that is not all. We have more roads to do in Denry North. The Richmond Ring Road, $1.7 million. The Tumeris Road in Austin Hill. Dubonnet Road. The Garrett Side Road, that is from Hayes to Carroll. Richmond School Road, Montego Oleon, a wall and a piece of road measuring about 40 feet, Mr. Speaker, that sparked protests last week or week before, because some people believed that what had happened in Roseau should inspire them. Notwithstanding, they were instructed to do what they did, but they were dealt with accordingly, Mr. Speaker, and they were told that they should never do that again. The Garrett Main Road, pothole and overlay. Mr. Speaker, we have been able to take care of the potholing on the Garrett Road. And soon enough, Mr. Speaker, we will find the resources to ensure that we provide that surface for the Garrett Road. Chimé Garrett là, c'est un chimé qui plie mes fondations en toute chimé vallée. Mais surface là, on ça nous créé tête chimé en même, c'est yon qui messe et qu'avant pièce de trafic monter en l'air pour pièce especially l'année la pluie, Mr. Speaker, on a une chai pothole et puis chimé ça là qu'a mené mal tête, pas seulement by moins qu'au parlementaire, mais aussi by monde qui a servi chimé ça. Rose Tavern Road, Belmont Overlay, the Sir Arthur Lewis Farm Road and the community to the back of Sir Arthur Lewis, the Parkbeff Road from Despin to Parkbeff in Oleon. That road has been costed, Mr. Speaker, at $998,000, or say $1 million. And the people of Parkbeff deserve a road because the community has grown exponentially. And every day, my very good friend and supporter, Edmund Smith, former St. Lucia under-19 cricket captain, is at me, and Smithy wants to know when can they get a road. And I understand why he wants the road. He does not want the road because he wants his vehicle to be parked next to his house, you know. But he understands the challenges because he has seen it firsthand, that when somebody is ill and they need the ambulance service, Mr. Speaker, the distance they have to travel with a stretcher to get the person to the Oleon Main Road. That is totally unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, and an intervention will be made.
Remember, you have 15 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are looking at the Jalim Road in Lower Austin Hill. We are looking at a road in Oleon to be constructed from Jurita to Brezo, Alamon Side Road in Grand Riviere, the Plainfield Road in Lapel, Lower Despin Beltham Road, Mr. Speaker, and the Oleon Combined School Road to connect to the cemetery. So we have a list of 19 roads. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? 19 roads, $9.5 million. And again, Mr. Speaker, I can point to roads in some constituencies where $9.5 million is just a paltry amount compared to what has happened. But I understand that I'm part of a team. I may not get all the roads, but I am certain, and I can tell the people of Denmark that this Prime Minister will, through the Ministry of Infrastructure, make resources available for some of the roads I mentioned to be rehabilitated. Mr. Speaker, let us move, Mr. Speaker, to Head 52, Department of Education, Innovation and Vocational Training. I have advocated, particularly in this term of government, that we are striking a very delicate balance between infrastructure projects and human resource development training interventions. Mr. Speaker, through the long-term training budget of the Ministry of Education, we have been able to provide higher education opportunities to hundreds of young St. Lucians. And the young people of Denmark North have not been left behind. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, we have 4 young persons from Denmark North who are currently enrolled at medical school. And let us do the mathematics. If, Mr. Speaker, you are to take a loan to go to medical school, you need at least $500,000 or $500,000. And depending on the institution, we're talking about $1 million or $1.5 million. So when we have 4, at an average of $500,000, we're talking $2 million. But that's not all. Our young people from Denmark North, Mr. Speaker, are accessing university education in ways our people never did before. And from 2021 to 2025, we have more people from Denmark North enrolled at university and in higher education programs than we would have had, Mr. Speaker, from independence to 2021. And all of them, Mr. Speaker, they get in on merit. So Caution is a farmer. He resides in Dibone. Caution never went to high school. But as we speak, his daughter Caroline is in Hungary, and she's about to finish her program so she can come back home, raise the profile of her family, raise the profile of Dibone, raise the profile of Grand Rivière and the Mabuya Valley, and raise the profile of this country, because she's coming back qualified, ready to make a contribution to the advancement of this country. And Selma was on her farm today. One of the few ladies who drives a pickup van around. She has a farm. She works hard. She didn't go to high school. She doesn't have a degree. But Jada, as we speak, is bracing the cold of Serbia, studying to become a medical doctor. That is the power of the St. Lucia Labour Party administration. Kimani from Richmond is in Taiwan. Koji only went to secondary school, but his daughter is in Taiwan studying tropical agriculture, so she can come back home and make a contribution. And Mr. Speaker, this is Alpha Louis Community College bursary. 8 out of every 10 students from the Mabuya Valley are supported on the bursary program or by the Office of the Parliamentarian. And the checks are there at the SSCDF, and I'm sure the Minister for Equity can ask for the file, and he will see how much of the CDP monies we're spending on higher education. So don't believe when you hear people tell you, say, Selma Shime, you cafe, epi building. Ça pas vrai, Mr. Speaker. Nous ni moun qui ka train. Ek se moun sa se ish, ek ti ish, moun qui te planté fig, ta qui passe, qui pas tenir éducation. But how dia nous tout, Mr. Speaker, through a process of education, we are taking our rightful leadership positions in this country, making our contributions to the advancement of this country. And that I want to be my legacy. Not the roads. Anybody can mix concrete and pave the road. But I want, Mr. Speaker, that after I would have left this political arena, that I can look back with satisfaction and vindication on the interventions I would have made in the lives of the young people of my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I told you we got nothing in 5 years. And let us go to Head 54, the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports. The United Workers' Party, particularly in Denmark North, have decided that the line of attack should be sports. Very few people in Denmark North can boast a more impressive record in sports than me, in a personal capacity, Mr. Speaker, and in terms of service. I know what sport has done for my development, or it did for my development. So that by the time I went to university, I was formalizing what I had already gotten for the Youth and Sports Council, through the SLFA Congress, and being on the board of management of the St. Lucia National Cricket Association, not to mention having captained my district and played for my country and played for the Windward Islands. So don't try to use sports as a weapon. My record speaks for itself. And Mr. Speaker, whether as athlete or as administrator, whether at the community level, the national level, or sub-regionally, my record speaks for itself. And so, during the last term of the Labour Party administration, or the last Labour Party government, $7 million to rehabilitate the Larissos playing field. Lights, pavilion, brand new surface, realignment of the river, land acquisition, changing rooms, and then you want to chide me and tell me my record in sports is dismal? Mr. Speaker, I have provided the enabling environment. But the sports administrators in the constituency need to wake up. They need to wake up. And I do not believe that as parliamentary rep, I should step in and dictate the affairs of constitutionally elected sports administration bodies, whether they exist at the community level or at the national level. And so, Mr. Speaker, when I hear that I have killed sports in the valley, I laugh. And what it does is that it underscores the desperation of a political party that after 3 years into a 4th year cannot see a pathway to victory, clutching at straws, and they will just punch in the dark to see if it will land. Mr. Speaker, I know we are on a good trajectory as an administration. I know we are doing well, not only by our own performances and the yardsticks that we use to measure the work we do, but based on what is coming from the other side, you can see the desperation. You can hear the desperation, and you can see, Mr. Speaker, the cluelessness with which they operate, not having a plan, and will never see the reins of power or governance in this country in anytime soon. Mr. Speaker, we are installing lights at the Grand Ravine playing field. Constituency Development Program. We got an initial contribution from the National Lotteries Authority. It is not enough, and so my CDP is stretched, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that after this presentation, whether it is the Prime Minister or the Minister for Sports, I will receive a WhatsApp message tonight to ask me to submit a bill or an invoice. Mr. Speaker, we're building a court at Richmond, CDP, and the Minister will tell you that it's not in his program. Mr. Speaker, we are going to install lights on the Denny River playing field. I have used my CDP monies to buy the poles and some of the fixtures. Again, I'm hoping that can be complemented by the Minister with responsibility for sports. Mr. Speaker, Head 46 Tourism, Ministry of Tourism. The community tourism project or program has impacted Denry North in a very, Mr. Speaker, profound way. Today, we have 2 young entrepreneurs who have invested in the ATV tour, the ATV tour niche, as we call it, Mr. Speaker. And so I must commend Brendan Shalry, better known as Ampa, and Elias Ford for having made those investments, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that if not in the area of ATV tours, that other young persons from the Mabuya Valley can see the need and will get the support of the ministry to invest in tourism-related activities in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, Head 42, the MSME grant. Several of the small businesses in Denry North have benefited and have received support from the Ministry of Commerce to help strengthen their businesses, Mr. Speaker, and others have actually gotten help to start up businesses and are doing well. I'm hoping that in the new cycle of disbursements, more small entrepreneurs from Denry North will be applying, of course, with the assistance of the Office of the Parliamentary Rep, to benefit from the MSME grant. Mr. Speaker, Head 41, the Ministry of Agriculture. Under the UBEC, several of our farmers, livestock farmers, vegetable farmers, and even banana farmers have benefited from the interventions made by the Ministry of Agriculture.
Remember, you have 5 minutes left.
On 2 occasions, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On 2 occasions, Mr. Speaker, we have had to intervene and help our banana farmers. In the first instance, Mr. Speaker, there was an issue at Winera where they could not get sufficient boxes to package their fruit to sell. And, Mr. Speaker, that resulted in tremendous setback for the farmers and the losses that they suffered. And, Mr. Speaker, also in relation to the black sickle disease and the unavailability of the oil that they needed to have treated their fields, again, the farmers suffered tremendous loss. But on both occasions, our government, being the compassionate government that we are, we were able, Mr. Speaker, to engage the farmers and to give them direct financial assistance that would help them meet their obligations to banks and to also help rehabilitate their farms. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, ground cover has been ordered and will be distributed through the CDP allocation to farmers in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, our government has done well. Mr. Speaker, to the detractors who say nous ne pouvons pas faire rien, to those who say chez Chimeyon, Mr. Speaker, je veux dire que le gouvernement a travaillé en l'enterré Jordan Renoff. Le gouvernement a travaillé en l'enterré Javalia. And if those persons who believe that attacking me on Facebook, whether it's through lives or through other means of communication, Mr. Speaker, if they believe that that is meant to shake me in my boots, I am as resolute and as fortified in the politics as I've ever been before. And I told you when I started, Mr. Speaker, that the conversation has started in Dennery North. People are already talking about 4 in a row, so that when the elections are called by the member for Castries East and nobody else, I can assure this honorable house, that the people of Dennery North, based on the satisfaction they are expressing with my performance, they will go to the polls, they will vote for Shawn Edward and the St. Lucia Labour Party again. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister. I want to thank my family. I want to thank my constituency group and the people of Dennery North for the opportunity to be their voice in the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, Dennery North is not and will never be an experiment. So people who want to try at something, you have to go elsewhere. Parliamentary representation is not about trying, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary representation is about having the lives of people in your hands. It is about going to cabinet and to parliament and ensure that you agitate and you advocate for resources where you can make interventions in the lives of the people, Mr. Speaker, who have voted for you. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the home caregivers under the stewardship of Shawn Edward for the tremendous work that they are doing in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, I support the estimates of revenue and expenditure as presented for 2025-2026. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues.